Thank you very much. Okay, so you see my screen, right? Um, okay, so the idea of this lecture is to give a framework about the SDGs and to give some context about the topic of sustainable cities in this framework, looking at the problem of sustainable cities from all sorts of different angles. So I'll just start with a bit of context about the SDGs. As I'm sure most of you know, the 17 SDGs were established by the UN in 2015. It is 17 goals for sustainable development, and each goal consists of several targets. Each target, in order to make sure that they are actionable, consists of a number of indicators or KPIs that can be used to measure the progress of achieving the goals outlined in the SDG framework. So if we go to the topic of sustainable cities, we can see that there are a lot of targets that are directly connected to urban planning and sustainable cities. In this presentation, I have outlined 9 main categories, which consist sometimes of one or two targets from the SDG framework, which are related um, to urban planning and to cities. The idea is to look at each of these categories separately, to see the statistics, get some background of the problems worldwide, but also local problems, to see what the indicators are, and to look at examples of how people are dealing with these targets from across the world. So we start with the first one, which is road traffic safety. The target is to reduce road traffic injuries and deaths, and the indicator here is death rate due to road traffic injuries. So as for all of these targets and all of these categories, we look at the map showing the KPI. If we look at death rate due to road traffic injuries per 100,000 people, we can see a huge variety across the world. We see that in the Dominican Republic, it has the worst death rate of 64, and Singapore has 2. Syria is 14.9, which is a little bit lower than the world average, which is 16.7. Those arrows that you see are showing the trend. So, for example, death rates is increasing in the Dominican Republic and reducing in most of the other places. Another statistic that is important to have in mind while we talk about road safety is the death rate of pedestrians when hit at different speeds. So here you see that if a pedestrian gets hit at 30 kilometers per hour, the chances of him surviving that or having not substantial injuries is very high, but that rate decreases dramatically with increase in speed. And this has inspired a lot of cities to lower the traffic speeds at 30 kilometers per hour all across the world, especially in residential areas and in the city centers. The idea is to limit the speed, to control the speed, but also to provide physical measures that make it impossible for cars to move faster. And here on this slide to the right, you can see some of these physical measures. For example, the raising of all pedestrian crossings to the level of the sidewalk instead of at the level of the street, and also having the lanes shift sideways so that the cars are forced to drive slower in order to do the maneuvers. And just as an example, at the map at the bottom left, you can see the 30 kilometer per hour zone in Brussels, Belgium, which is one of the most ambitious projects. All of the streets that you see in yellow have a speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour, while only the blue ones, which are the main boulevards in the city, have a speed limit of 50 kilometers per hour. It was implemented in 2021, and already the municipality has established that it caused 10% fewer road accidents and reduced the exposure to noise pollution for 53% of the residents. However, I'm going to show a lot of statistics in this presentation, but we should always keep in mind that this data could be cherry picked, and maybe yeah, I think it's good to look at this data critically, because of course the Brussels municipality is trying to prove the case that it works, but I have, while researching this project, I have also found a lot of sources that have more critical take on this project. And when talking about road safety, I think it would be beneficial for you and for your projects that you're going to propose in future to also take a deeper look at Janet Sadikan, who has been the commissioner for at the Department of Transport in New York, but also is working with Bloomberg Associates to improve streets and road traffic safety across the world, partnering with different cities. And some of her projects, well-known projects, is the Plaza program in New York, which converted boulevards and public plazas into public space. The most famous example of which is the Times Square, but also some initiatives that she's doing with the Bloomberg Associates, like Streets for Kids, where the philosophy is that if a street is safe for kids, it is better for all of us and for all users. And also the Asphalt Art Initiative, which is a great way to intervene with a low budget and low cost at the street in order to create a more vibrant, more attractive public space, but also to improve safety and to, for example, outline the crossings so that even it's more useful for drivers. Moving on to the next topic, the responsible water use. Here, the sustainable target is target 6.4, increase water use efficiency and ensure freshwater supplies. And the indicators are the level of water stress and the change in water use efficiency over time. Again, if we look at the map, this is a map of water use per capita by country. You can see that there is a huge difference in the amount of water used per capita in different countries. For example, USA is at the top of the list with 1,500 cubic meters, while Uganda only 18 cubic meters per year. I couldn't find any information on Syria, but it would be maybe it would be useful for you to, when working on responsible water use, to research that data. And it is important to, when we talk about water use, to look at what water is mainly used for across the world. By far, the main user of water is agriculture and industry. Here, with white, I have outlined the domestic water use and the municipal water use for public services, which are the only two branches in this graph that can actually be improved with urban planning and with architectural means. So we should keep in mind that any intervention would have a limited effect in the overall water use, because agriculture industry are by far the biggest users. And when talking about responsible water use, the best example from across the world is Singapore, where they have very limited water resources. As you know, Singapore is very um, the population is very dense, and the area is very limited. So they have the ambition to be fully self-sufficient despite having very few water resources, and they are on track of achieving that with rainwater collection, recycled water, desalination, reducing the losses in the network, and stimulating people to use less water, which also has they also have financial stimulus for people to do that. Moving on, we look at renewable energy and energy efficiency. Here, the main SDG that speaks about energy, SDG 7, and here are two of the targets, which are again related to using more renewable energy and improving the energy efficiency of worldwide. Again, if you look at a map, we can see the energy use per capita varies drastically. Overall, worldwide, people use 21,000 kilowatt hours per capita per year. As you can see, in Syria, it's much lower at 5,000, while in countries like Qatar, it's 220,000. And it is important also to keep in mind that when we talk about sustainable energy, they are still using mostly fossil fuels, and the amount of fossil fuels that are used for energy worldwide are increasing every year despite efforts to uh, prevent climate change. When we look at the problem of renewable energy and energy efficiency on the urban scale, maybe one of the best examples is the Masdar City Master Plan in the United Arab Emirates, designed by initially the plan was designed by Foster and Partners, and although the project is still in completion and very small parts of it have been actually built, it is still the approaches here are the best approaches for reduction of energy use and energy efficiency, and these are yeah, common things like solar energy, especially in this climate, the Internet of Things, and they have a specific smart city center which monitors energy use and tries to make the energy use much more efficient. But also passive strategies like minimized solar gain, passive cooling, and of course stimulating sustainable transportation. The city is designed for pedestrian transportation mainly, but also provides sustainable transportation, as you can see on this rendering. Moving on, talking about transportation. Here the SDGs are SDG 9 and SDG 11, which both talk about the access of people to transportation and sustainable transportation. Here, an important indicator is the share of urban population with convenient access to public transport. And here, convenient is defined as a bus stop or low capacity transport stop around 500 meters from where people live, and the metro in around 1,000 meters from where people live. And here, by far, Spain is doing the best with 96% of urban population within 500 meters of a public transport stop. When we talk about sustainable transportation, it is very important to keep in mind that different modes of transport have vastly different carbon footprints. Here you can see the carbon footprint of travel per passenger per kilometer. And of course, airplanes, despite having a higher amount of people, have the biggest carbon footprint. Petrol cars as well, motorbikes third, and then all means of public transportation are much more efficient and have a much lower carbon footprint. And here I wanted to show you two examples from Colombia, which which increase the access to public transportation for people with relatively low cost. The first one is the Transmilenio bus rapid transit system in Bogota, which where the buses it was actually established as an alternative to the metro in the city, which has been planned but still hasn't been built due to very high costs. And this is a very cost-efficient alternative to the metro, where each of these buses it consists of 12 lines, and they are isolated from the road traffic. Bogota is one of the most congested cities in the world, and it is important that these buses run in their own lanes. They even have their own intersections, as you can see in the bottom picture. And the system proved to be extremely efficient, providing daily transport for more than 2 million people. The bus stops are out are in the center of the roads, and they are connected through bridges. So the whole system is isolated from the road traffic, and that reduces travel time and also reduces fuel per passenger kilometer. The other example is from Medellin, where in order to improve the access of slum residents, the municipality created 6 lines of cable cars, which they connect these people in the hilly outskirts of the city directly to the metro lines and the metro system of the city. And the idea here is that by providing easy access for people in informal housing to the city center and to where they work, you can increase their economic status, you can improve their quality of life, and you can make sure that they have sufficient jobs and lower commute times. Moving on, we will talk about safe and affordable housing. And here the most important target is target 11.1, safe and affordable housing, which the indicator being proportion of the urban population living in slim households. As you can see, the goal here is that by 2030, everybody has access to affordable housing and basic services, and slums need to be upgraded. Again, if you look at the world map of this indicator, we can see that still 25% of urban residents live in slums. And the situation is worst in Africa, but also, as you can see, Syria has 40% according to the United Nations. And here there is one of the best examples for intervention in slums and improvement of the living conditions for slum dwellers is the Favela Bairro project in Rio de Janeiro, where the idea was to improve the infrastructure, to provide public space and public facilities, to improve the housing when that's needed, but also to legalize the land and to give property rights to everybody who built their house in the slum, so that they have the means to be active citizens, to participate formally into the economy, and to have services provided to them. And also it consists of a lot of social programs, including education, employment, and community development. It is also important to mention the work of somebody that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, Alejandro Aravena, who has been an advocate for social housing and for the improvement of living conditions in slums. One of his most famous projects, the Quinta Monroy Housing, has provided housing for informal settlement residents for just $10,000, which has been the grant for per family for the improvement of the living conditions for these residents. And here, what's important in this project is that the idea is to take advantage of the resourcefulness of the informal housing dwellers, and instead of providing them with a compromised house, they provide them with the basis for what he calls a good house, being 80 square meters. Another important project that he has proposed is the Inter-American Development Bank in Buenos Aires, where again it focuses on the idea that by connecting the informal settlements to the city center, you increase their economic opportunities, you improve their quality of life, and you provide lower commute times for them when they go to work. And something that he stresses as the most important thing in while when intervening at informal settlements is the participatory process and including the residents in every single stage of the process. Moving on to inclusive and sustainable urbanization, here we have targets from SDG 11 and SDG 13 related to the greenhouse gas emissions and participatory process in the design of cities. If we look at greenhouse gas emissions per capita per year, again, we see that the average global resident um, is responsible for 6.7 tons of CO2 equivalents per year. Syria is dramatically lower at 1.6, and Qatar is the highest at 68 tons per year. Here it is important to to mention that different types of cities have vastly different CO2 emissions per person per year. For example, here we see a comparison between Atlanta in the US and Barcelona in Spain, which are two cities with relatively similar population. However, Atlanta is a car-centric city with a lot of urban sprawl and a lot of highways, while Barcelona is incredibly dense and pedestrian-friendly. Here you see a scale comparison of the footprints of the city, and as you can see from the statistics at the bottom, Barcelona's per capita emissions are 10 times lower than that of Atlanta. Uh, Having established that compact cities have a much significant environmental footprint, a lot of ideas in recent years have been developed to stress on that. For example, the 15-minute city concept, which has been popularized by Carlos Moreno, where the idea is that every resident lives within 15 minutes of all necessary daily services. Um, and the the idea is to improve walkability, public transport connectivity, to provide amenities and opportunities for every resident all across the city, so that you stimulate walking and you reduce emissions. But also the concept stresses on the social impacts of dense cities and on the social interactions and activities on public spaces that compact cities provide. Another person that is important to mention in this category is Yang Geo, who is an urbanist focused on creating people-friendly and pedestrian-friendly cities. He has stressed the importance of compact cities, of walkability, of the human scale of cities, and how this can not only improve emissions but also improve the quality of life for people. And he has partnered with a lot of cities across the world, as you can see here, for example, Moscow, Melbourne, and San Francisco, to have small interventions which increase the public space and which provide a better quality of life for the residents. Moving on, the seventh category is the resilience to natural disasters. And here we have two very similar targets from SDG 11 and from SDG 13, which are to strengthen the resilience to natural disasters, mostly caused by climate change. Another important statistic here, if we look at the global picture, is the number of deaths per year from natural disasters. This, however, is a figure that varies at different years a lot. So here we're seeing the statistic for 2021, and we can see that Haiti has the most amount of deaths. However, yeah, this varies due to different events across the world. But if we look at the trends, we can see that the deaths from natural disasters have significantly decreased over the last 100 years. So here to the left, you can see deaths from natural disasters for each decade from 1900s to 2020. And to To the right, we can see a breakdown of the causes for deaths by natural disasters over the last decade. As you can see, droughts, floods, earthquakes, and storms are biggest causes, but all of them are going down. However, we should pay attention to extreme temperatures, which is going up, and we can expect with advancement of climate change that this figure could increase, and this could be a bigger and bigger issue for cities across the world. It is important to mention the urban heat island effect, which further exacerbates the effects of heat waves and causes even bigger problems for residents. And it is mainly caused due to the impermeable surfaces and the thermal mass of the materials in the city, but also waste heat from transportation and air conditioning, especially in dense cities. And it results in the increase of temperature in the city center by a few degrees compared to the rest of the territory. It could be mitigated by providing more permeable surfaces, more green spaces, cooling the roofs, providing green roofs, but even just changing the color of the roofs and the surfaces of the roads could be enough to lower the impacts of the heat island effect, and also um, just adding water features which provide evaporative cooling could also decrease the level of heat stress in the city centers. One of the leading examples of natural disaster mitigation in urban planning from across the world are the sponge cities, which have been built over the last couple of decades in China. Here, the cities are provided with wetlands and permeable pavings to decrease the flood stress. So these green areas are designed to be flooded when there is a lot of rain or the rivers get out of their riverbeds. And the vegetation and design of these green areas are specifically um, designed so that they can store the storm water and then release it slowly so that there is no stress on the city. It also helps with heat island effects, soil erosion, and reduces sinking because a lot of densely packed cities like New York and Jakarta have actually been observed to sink due to the um, limited drainage into the soil because all of the water goes into the sewage and then leaves the city, which reduces the groundwater underneath the city. So these two examples from sponge cities in China are huge and have been proposed on the level of urban planning. But to the right, we can see an example of using the same principles to create small sponges on streets in densely packed cities. For example, again, having permeable surfaces and having water storage underneath the sidewalks. Moving on, another category is clean cities, and here we have targets for decreasing the environmental impact of cities and for improving the air quality of cities. It is important to mention that despite the trend going down, more than 11% of the population worldwide, more than 11% of the deaths worldwide are attributed to air pollution. The situation is worse in North Korea and best in Finland. As you can see, Syria is near the world average with 13% of deaths attributed to air pollution. So what are the sources of air pollution? As we can see, the most of the sources, for example, transportation, industry, energy production, and the buildings, uh, are found or could be found in cities. So, of course, the air pollution is the worst in cities, and the bigger the city, the worse the situation. And a lot of cities worldwide are implementing low emission zones to deal with the transport factor of. So actually, if we look back at this pie chart, they're dealing with the 14% transportation cost, but all of the other causes of pollution could be actually dealt with policies and regulations rather than urban planning solutions. However, what can be improved with urban planning solutions is the low emission zones. Here, for example, you see the low emission and ultra low emission zone in London, where cars emitting high levels of noise pollution have been limited or have to pay in order to enter the city or the city center. And this has been proven to reduce emissions, reduce noise pollution, but also the UK has estimated that it will prevent 1 million hospital admissions due to air pollution by 2050. And lastly, accessible green and public space. Here, the SDG 11, Target 7, um, suggests that by 2030 we need to provide safe, inclusive, and accessible green and public space for everyone. Again, the KPI here is share of urban population with convenient access to open public space. And as we can see, the situation varies from 8% in Zambia to 98% in Denmark. I couldn't find any information for Syria. Here are some examples of how you can intervene and increase the public and green space in cities, especially in densely packed cities where there has not been provided enough green space to begin with. For example, the Barcelona superblocks, which have been introduced in 2016, which transform some of the streets into public spaces, reclaim the streets as public and green spaces, and reduce the road traffic only to local traffic. It has been proven to decrease air pollution, and after implementing these super blocks, 60% of the local residents, uh, 60% less of the local residents have, uh, sorry, 60% of the people have self-reported as being more comfortable walking around the city. Another very low-cost solution to increase in public and green space is parklets, which reclaim parking spots near the um, sidewalks to provide a little bit of public and green space, which provides social interactions, very beneficial for local businesses, and became very popular during the COVID-19 pandemic when people were preferring outdoor spaces to indoor spaces. So these are the categories of SDGs that relate to urban planning, and I would be happy to hear your feedback and to see to discuss how this could be beneficial in your proposals for your project. Thank you very much.